Rain lashed against the windows. Wind howled through the old building. Inside her dimly lit apartment, Karen tried to ignore the storm's fury. She wished she hadn't chosen to stay alone tonight. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind sent shivers down her spine. The power flickered, plunging the room into darkness for a fleeting moment. Fear began to tighten its grip. The shrill ringing of the phone shattered the silence.
Gasps. Hello?
Silence, then a faint, raspy breath on the other end.
Who's there?
The breathing grew louder, more insistent. A wave of dizziness washed over her.
Hello?
The line went dead. Karen tried to shake off the unease. It was just a prank call, she told herself. But the silence in the apartment now felt heavy, oppressive. She could almost feel the weight of the quiet pressing down on her shoulders, making it hard to breathe. The shadows in the corners seemed to grow darker, more menacing. She glanced at the clock. It was just past midnight. The witching hour, she thought with a shiver. A text message arrived. Unknown number again. It read, "I can hear you."
Karen's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the blood rushing in her ears, a deafening roar that drowned out the silence. She tried to steady her breathing, but it was no use. Her hands trembled as she clutched the phone, staring at the message. Who could it be? Why were they doing this? She felt a chill run down her spine, as if icy fingers were tracing the length of her back.
Panic swelled in her chest. Her breaths became shallow and rapid. She checked the locks on the door twice. The phone rang again, the same number, the same eerie breathing. She didn't answer. Instead, she backed away from the door, her eyes darting around the room. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the curtains seemed amplified in the stillness. She felt trapped, like a caged animal. Her mind raced with possibilities. Should she call the police? But what would she tell them? That she was scared of a few prank calls? She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She needed to stay calm, to think rationally. But the fear was overwhelming, suffocating. She could feel it wrapping around her like a thick fog, clouding her judgment. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She needed to find a way out of this nightmare, but how? The phone rang again, and this time she couldn't ignore it. With trembling hands, she picked it up, her heart in her throat. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. There was a pause, and then the same eerie breathing filled her ears. She felt a scream rising in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She couldn't let them know how scared she was. She had to be strong. She had to find a way to end this. The phone continued its relentless ringing. Karen turned up the volume on the TV, desperate to drown out the sound. The noise was incessant, a constant reminder of her growing unease. She tried to focus on the TV, but the images on the screen blurred together, unable to hold her attention. The ringing seemed to echo through the empty spaces of her apartment, each ring amplifying her anxiety. She felt trapped, unable to escape the sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Shadows seemed to twist and lengthen in the flickering light. She noticed movement in the reflection of the window, a fleeting glimpse of something sinister. Her heart raced as she strained to see more clearly, but the shadows played tricks on her eyes. Was it just her imagination, or was there really something there? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making her feel even more vulnerable. She backed away from the window, her mind racing with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Spinning around, she found nothing. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in on her, the familiar surroundings now alien and threatening. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the curtains sent shivers down her spine. She felt like she was being watched, but no matter where she looked, she saw nothing. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional distant sound that made her jump. She was trapped in her own home, a place that should have been safe, now a cage of fear.
Sobbing softly, "Please, no." Her voice was barely a whisper, choked with fear and desperation. She felt utterly alone, her cries for help swallowed by the darkness. The tears streamed down her face, each one a testament to her growing terror. She hugged herself tightly, trying to find some comfort in the midst of her panic, but it was no use. The fear was overwhelming, consuming her every thought and leaving her paralyzed with dread.
Her fear was now a living, breathing entity, trapping her in a nightmare she couldn't escape. It was as if the darkness itself had come alive, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every sound a potential danger. She was caught in a web of terror, unable to break free. The night stretched on, each minute feeling like an eternity as she waited for the dawn that seemed like it would never come. Her mind raced with thoughts of what could be lurking in the shadows, each one more horrifying than the last. She was trapped not just in her apartment, but in her own fear, a prisoner of her own mind. The storm raged on, mirroring the turmoil within Sarah. The phone remained silent now, but the silence was somehow worse. It pulsed with unspoken threats.
I feel a presence in the apartment, watching me, toying with me.
She caught glimpses of movement from the corner of her eye, fleeting shadows that vanished when she turned to face them. A knock on the door sent a jolt of terror through her. Frozen with fear, she stared at the entrance. Another knock, louder this time.
Who is it?
She choked out, her voice barely audible. Silence, then a voice, raspy and chillingly familiar.
Let me in, Sarah.
Her blood ran cold. This was not a prank. Something was outside, and it knew her name. Terror gave her a surge of adrenaline. She grabbed her phone, ready to call for help, but the line was dead. The power flickered again, plunging the apartment into darkness, then silence. The knocking stopped.
Whispering, "Oh no, what's happening?"
Sarah held her breath, listening for any sound. Suddenly a crash from the kitchen. Her mind raced. There was someone or something inside with her. Armed with a kitchen knife, her hand trembling, Sarah crept towards the kitchen. The room was empty, the back door ajar. The wind howled through the open door, sending chills down her spine.
I can feel my sanity slipping away. Am I hallucinating? Is this all in my head?
The line between reality and nightmare blurred.
Sarah.
It seemed to come from within her own mind. She spun around, searching for the source.
You can't hide from me, Sarah.
It was everywhere and nowhere at once. The phone in her hand vibrated. It was a text from her own number. "I am you."
It is.
She threw the phone against the wall, shattering it into a million pieces. She was losing her mind. She could feel it happening. The shadows seemed to reach out to her, pulling her into the darkness. The whispers grew louder, consuming her thoughts, her fears, her very being. She sank to the floor, her sanity slipping away. The storm subsided as dawn approached. The apartment was silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. The only evidence of the terrifying night was the broken phone and the shattered remnants of Sarah's sanity. She was gone, vanished. Had she escaped into the night, or had something more sinister taken hold? The question lingered in the air unanswered, a chilling reminder that some doors are better left unopened, some calls unanswered. The haunting continues. But the silence was deceptive. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, a sense of foreboding that seemed to seep into the very walls of the apartment. The storm had left behind more than just physical destruction. It had imprinted a sense of dread that refused to dissipate with the dawn. The broken phone lay on the floor, a stark reminder of the frantic calls for help that had gone unanswered. The shattered glass from the window glistened in the early morning light, casting eerie reflections that danced across the room. Sarah's disappearance was a mystery that gnawed at the edges of reality. Friends and family were left in a state of shock, their minds racing with questions and fears. Had she been taken by some malevolent force, or had she simply lost her grip on reality and fled into the night? The police found no signs of forced entry, no clues that pointed to an abduction. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist, leaving behind only the chaos of her final moments. As the days turned into weeks, the apartment remained untouched, a shrine to the unknown. Neighbors whispered about the strange occurrences that had plagued Sarah in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Flickering lights, cold drafts, and the feeling of being watched had all been dismissed as figments of an overactive imagination. But now, in the cold light of day, those dismissals seemed foolish, dangerous even. The haunting continues, not just in the physical space of the apartment, but in the minds of those who knew Sarah. Every creak of the floorboards, every unexpected shadow served as a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. The line between reality and the supernatural had blurred, leaving a lingering question. Was Sarah a victim of her own mind, or had she stumbled upon something far more terrifying? The haunting continues.